Mackenzie. Hey, this is Owen. Don't forget to like our show and subscribe.
This podcast is brought to you by the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. What is one thing that you could do to think, speak, or act kindly today? Go to loveandkindnessproject.org to learn more. Before we begin this podcast, if you or someone you know is in crisis or needs emotional support, there are tools that can help. So get yourself a pen and paper or open a note-taking app on your phone or computer. Feel free to pause this episode while you get yourself ready. The episode starts at 1 minute and 24 seconds. You can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. You can text 45645, which is coming in the fall of 2023. In Canada, you can also call 988, the Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. The Trans Lifeline in Canada is 1-877-330-6366. And in the United States, 1-877-565-8860. Or call 911. You are not alone, and you do not have to be alone. I would like to honor and recognize the traditional and unceded territories of the Katzie, Kwantlen, and Semiahmoo nations on whose territory I live, work, and play. Welcome to We Are the ADHD Family podcast. This podcast is meant to chronicle our journey with ADHD, autism, and other discoveries along the way. I reach out to advocates, experts, individuals, and other families that want to raise their voices and empower those on their journey. My name is Mark Smeets, and I am passionate about removing barriers for others through creating connections and building on strengths and practical problem solving. I am married to Siobhan, a parent to 2 wonderful kids, and all of us have ADHD. I want you to feel like you have power and hope. And now, into the episode.
What if a car crashes into Hulk? Then you get a mini Hulk.
Welcome to a new episode of We Are the ADHD Family and the Advocateurs. Thanks for tuning in. In our previous episode with author Mark Graban, we dove into his ADHD journey and he took us through the roller coaster that he experienced. In this episode, we're going to dive way more into the process improvement side of his journey. And we're going to get his thoughts about being an expert in this field of process improvement and going through the diagnosis phase. Just one thing to be aware of, in this episode, we do get into a bit of jargon, and I believe I explained most of it. But there will be some funny things that happen as a result, and I hope you enjoy the concert story as well. Mark's newest book, The Mistakes That Make Us, is out now, and you can find it on Amazon and other providers that are listed on his website, www.markgraban.com. I also highly recommend checking out his many podcasts. They are excellent. I also name drop a mutual friend of ours, Katie Anderson, who is also another author, and her latest book that she wrote with Isao Yoshino called Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, which just won another award, is available at all major bookstores, and you can check out our website at kbjanderson.com. One show note before we get into the rest of the episode. There's a term that I used in the first episode about being twice gifted, and immediately when this episode starts, I'm going to get into it again. But I wanted to give you a definition of what twice gifted is. So twice gifted or twice exceptional, sometimes you see that written as 2E. There are children and people who are highly gifted in areas math, writing, music, etc. But they also are ADHD, dyslexic, dyscalculia, autistic, sensory processing. They fit into both categories. And that is where twice exceptional or 2E comes from. It means that they've got an exceptional ability and they've also got a disability. They are gifted, but they also face a learning or developmental challenge. And during the recording of this episode, I didn't realize the full description of it, and I wanted to go educate myself, and that's why I'm putting this before the episode starts. I did a poor job of asking Mark the question, and I apologize for that, but it made sense to ask him because that was what was going through my mind. So let's pick up where we left off, because I know there's a bunch of questions I really wanted to ask you and pick your brain on. That experience you were in the quote unquote in the gifted program. I know there's the term twice gifted, and did you ever get a diagnosis of that?
Oh, well, I don't know that term then, ironically or otherwise.
I think it just means gifted in some way is my layman's understanding of it.
I don't remember that phrase ever being part of the discussion there. Yeah.
Because what I find interesting is that, one of the questions that you've been asked, I've been asked, others have been asked as well, is, were you in any trouble in school? Well,
Right.
you had an outlet. You had an outlet to express that creativity that was going on in your mind, and I found it is interesting how maybe there is that. Now, I don't know if that's something to explore for later on, but that sort of giftedness of being in those advanced programs from where you were, relative to your peers. If you hadn't have had those, what is the trouble that you may have gotten into?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think
trouble in air quotes.
Yeah. I mean, like when I was in first and second grade, or kindergarten through second grade, before the gifted program, I think it was more of just like social disruption of like the kids singling you out as different because, I was being sent, if I was in first grade, I'd be sent to, I don't know, the second grade classroom for reading and the third grade classroom for math. And, you're the only one kind of getting that kind of special accommodation. I don't remember being like, I don't have vivid memories of it, but I mean, kids are going to single out the kid who
is different
that way, so I do greatly appreciate that I was able to do, that magnet program from like third grade through eighth grade. And then in high school, like half of the day was in that sort of kind of structure. But, I was in AP classes. And so, I mean, gosh, it would either be like, band or gym or health class were about the only classes where you were in part that broader general population of the school. And then thankfully I had opportunities to attend really challenging, great universities. And, then, that real world experience of that, that first 2 years working experience between college and grad school, was a huge challenge. But I mean, here's my takeaway of it. I think this is answering a question you didn't ask, and we can get off this topic. But like, I don't think I have like this negative bias or trouble working with people. Let's say on the shop floor in an organization that maybe have their high school diploma. I got along great with people working the shop floor at General Motors. And in some cases, I got along better than I did with some of the quote unquote leaders who were doing things. Here was this triggered sense of fairness. There's a lot of bad leadership, a lot of bad behavior.
Yes,
that was really frustrating. Not because, was that?
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
Both of us.
So, I mean, if there was this hypothesis of like, oh, well, you're in the gifted and talented program, and that's good for you now, but you're going to have trouble dealing in the real world. Like, it's not so cut and dry, simple.
No.
Like that. But back to your point of, I had environments where I could be myself, I mean, I'm not trying to paint a picture of a school with no rules or boundaries or, whatever, but it was a better fit environment for kids like me.
Yeah. And that just happens to get I was going to say sometimes that ends up happening where you get that label as gifted, and it's a door that opens up for some of those, for some people. And it's a wonderful thing when somebody's able to explore their potential, from elementary school to high school to college. Like, that is it. I think it gets a different, what's the word? You may not necessarily have the other barriers of having to convince a teacher, hey, look, I actually really am smart, or something like that. But that's what I was kind of That's what I was wondering. But the shop floor thing that you mentioned, like you and I both know the fact that we're willing to show up on the shop floor and do the work and be there for people. It's a massive amount of respect that anybody who's working on a shop floor or a hospital floor or in a warehouse, you and I have both seen that effect of the respect that comes through when you're willing to be shoulder to shoulder with somebody, and that's a big deal.
And I think we both know that intelligence and educational attainment are not perfectly correlated, because there are some people who just didn't have the same kinds of opportunities educationally, home life, parents, other circumstances. I
was talking with a nurse friend yesterday when I was working at the health authority, and I showed her two of the things that I was working on, and she just stopped me dead in my sentence, and she goes, "How do you not have extra letters at the end of your name?"
Yeah.
And I was just like, I was not expecting.
It's that healthcare credentialing thing. It's like, I think the record I've seen is somebody had 23 different letters after their given name and their family name of different professional designations.
That's congratulations to them. But it's I'm not going to have that many credentials after my name. A lot of this is just lived experience and comes straight from the heart, especially with what I was showing her. Anyways, one of the other areas I wanted to dive into is going to be the process side of things. So as far as resources go, were you ever lost for resources? Were there resources that were helpful? Did you ever ask yourself, I've got my diagnosis, what now?
No, there's not been a lack of resources. I'm in a very privileged position where I can get access to physicians and counselors and medication and whatever I have to pay for out of pocket in our system of the way it works down here. I can do that. If anything, the barrier, and what I thought was the barrier, or the little bit of beating up on myself that I've tried to stop, is like, why didn't I take this more seriously 20 years ago or 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Or 5 years ago. Right. Yep. I mean, I think that the inhibition was my own willingness to, try to deal with it. And again, like, I didn't have some sort of rock bottom life moment of, work or personal life. It wasn't a situation that I had to address because of external factors.
Yeah.
But it's more of like part of this journey of, I know I shouldn't have unrealistic expectations. I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be. There are going to be days where my attention is better than others. That's normal. There's days when my energy level is going to be higher than others. That's normal, right? I mean, it's that different journey of thinking of, like, how do I find the right balance in wanting to be better, do better, do more, versus, all right, well, how much is enough?
It's funny, and it's funny that you say do more, because especially in the past 12 months for me, maybe now 13 or 14 months, the do more thing is, I feel like with the things that I've started to do, podcast is one of them, but the other advocating things I've started to do, it feels like that I do want to do so much more, and that there's this, I don't know what it is. It almost feels like the first time I started playing music and playing bass, and it was like, I just have this fire to sit there and do everything. And maybe 20 years ago, things could have changed, but I wouldn't be where I am right now if I hadn't gone through everything. And, you talking about, like, when we had our break for a moment, just reflecting back on, if I hadn't have done, if we hadn't have had the experience that we've had with Owen and I've had with my work stuff, and the idea of just being, the mistakes that we made, or my favorite mistake, you probably wouldn't be having this conversation. And I don't
Mm,
think I would be as focused or or seeing myself as a force for good,
mm,
um, as maybe it could have been, because it's almost like I sort of needed. It's not that I didn't. I almost want to say I kind of needed the mission, I think.
mm, mhm.
And I mean, nothing is. I mean, for us, for me, trying to get Owen the help that we needed at the time and he needs, that was its own, that certainly was the catalyst for everything.
Yeah.
From a process improvement point of view, um, where how do I ask you this question? Um, where do you see the gaps in terms of what you went through? And if we talk about, if we were to think of this in terms of a value stream map, and I'll do an explanation on the show for what a value stream map is. But if we think about, the end goal of being what the final product is supposed to be for
Mhm.
value and what we're starting with and where you are, what's missing from this process? What needs to be taken out?
Mm.
What are the unnecessary gatekeepers that you've experienced, or has this thing been exactly what you expected and you're good with it?
Um, are you asking that is the end product my development as the value stream that's producing that? Is that what you're asking?
Now that you've said that, I could see the value being defined as either the diagnosis or just being good with where you are.
Mm.
And maybe just being good with where you are is really the idea.
I think that's what the psychologist is trying to help me work toward. Being good with where you are and who you are.
Yeah.
It's this question of like, so well, every human being has inherent value.
Mhm.
That value isn't driven by what you accomplish, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we're all driven to achieve things to different degrees, and I've achieved a lot. I don't know if those are unrealistic expectations of like seeing some sort of gap. That's maybe an unfair expectation where I shouldn't be viewing it as a gap. I think that's part of the ongoing question of like, what is this, timeless struggle of man of like, what are you striving for?
Mhm.
Um, and are you satisfied with where you are? Or are you trying to do more? Like, I mean, I wrote another book, right? I mean, it's my third solo book. Having two books is an accomplishment, right? I mean, but
Yep.
at some point you feel driven or interested to do a third, not for
Mhm.
external validation, because it seemed like a fun thing to do, and I hope it's good for my business and it helps other people. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's this question of like, back to sitting in a meeting and I'm not actively engaged and I don't need to be. Like,
Mhm.
there's this kind of like this motor of like, I'd rather be doing something than
Yeah.
sitting passively and not
Yes.
doing something.
Yep.
And are there unhealthy, is there an unhealthy lack of limits to that in my own mind or in my own practice? My mother-in-law, commented her observation, as we've kind of talked about some of these things in the past year and a half, her one observation, and she meant it lovingly. She's like, yeah, she said, Mark, you only operate at one speed. Like that speed is on.
Yes, see, my
Yeah.
wife says the same thing to me,
Yeah.
and I've said that to a few others. And I remember one time years ago we were talking with Owen and showing him how does your engine run, and this idea of low, medium, and high. And certain times of the day it changes. And Owen was like high for good part of the day, like starts low, goes to medium, then straight high, and that's what it is. And Siobhan was kind of more lower to medium. And then I'm just like, I told the doctor we were talking to, I said, I'm just high.
Yeah.
That's it. I just go. I wake up and I just go.
Right.
And that's when she expressed concern, like, have you had a break? I'm like, no.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I do not work 24/7. But I mean, and I do things for fun and leisure activities. You play bass.
Yep.
I've gotten back into playing drums more regularly. We went and saw an amazing jazz bass player in concert last night in Cincinnati, right? Marcus Miller.
Oh, serious?
Yeah.
Damn it. Jealous.
So, but quick story though. So, I know how to behave in a jazz show, right?
Mhm.
You're there for the music and you're there to respect these world-class performers that you have the treat to be able to come and see. And I don't have any trouble holding back impulse to like I'm there for the music. I'm not talking during the show. Of the four guys in front of us, a couple of them were talking a lot. And I'm like, you're not jazz people, I guess. But like they seem to be enjoying the show, right? Or the music, but they were just talking so much. I'm going to tell people to my left and to my wife's right were also annoyed by them. So I don't think I had an unrealistic expectation for their behavior that you could come and just shut the heck up for 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So at one point though, I don't think it was the worst impulse control on my part, but I did lean forward because like, it's one thing to say like, oh, I love this song. Like, okay, fine.
Sure, no problem.
Like whatever back and forth was happening on like the volley, I'm like, that's a conversation now. And I leaned forward and I said something like, guys, this is not a place for conversation.
Yeah.
And then they got quiet again for a while. And I wasn't letting them bother me. But one of these other traits from this article about unfairness or being triggered or upset by things is that supposedly ADHD people have trouble letting something go.
Oh,
and that trait resonated with me, right? Whether that's caused by ADHD or not. So then these guys were quiet for a while. But then, of course, during like the quietest song of the evening, where Marcus Miller's now playing a very sad, soulful, weepy bass clarinet, right? This is not loud fusion jazz anymore. These bozos start talking again. And I'm not saying this was the worst reaction in the world. I'm not saying it was the best reaction, but I leaned forward and I told them to shut the point made. But then the third of the four bozos was triggered by this, and he was pretty drunk, and he was bigger than me. But I knew everyone around me had my back. Well, now he starts cursing at me to calm the F down, and that he was going to beat my. I'm not just defending the performers of those around me. It was really distracting me from the show.
Oh, big
and
time.
I'm kind of having trouble letting it go today. 16 hours later, because here I am bringing it up. Sorry, I don't know if that's at all relevant to any of this, but
and then Marcus Miller invited you backstage and said,
no. we were far enough away from the stage that hopefully he wasn't distracted. But my attempt to quiet them down caused temporarily more distraction.
Yeah.
But I think people around me kind of had my back on that.
Here is the 20-second kindness break.
Mackenzie, when you go back to school, what is one kind act that you can say to somebody?
Can I help you?
Owen, what is one kind thing that you can tell yourself when you go back to school and try something new?
Telling myself I can do it.
Hi, this is Siobhan from the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. Check out loveandkindnessproject.org and find other ways to carry out kind acts or start a kindness project of your own.
The funniest one I ever had was went to see Dream Theater, and Opeth was opening for them. And Dream Theater is progressive metal band. Opeth is a progressive death metal band, but they're also prog in general. Anyways, so I'm big fans of both bands. But the show starts, and my friend had gotten us. We were fourth row, and the show begins, and everybody's always standing up, and I'm just into it, and I'm like, they're playing songs that I've been wanting to hear, and I love watching Mendez play bass, and I'm just entranced, sitting there standing up like arms crossed. I'm just happy, and then I'm like, kind of look around me, and I'm like looking back in Queen Elizabeth Theater and going, everybody's sitting down except me. And then the singer's just like, he goes, this guy in a Swedish accent, he's like, this guy over here, he's having a good time. And
Yeah.
that was the most it was. But I was probably standing for a good 25 minutes into it before I even realized what had gone on. So
Yeah.
that was a funny moment. I'm curious, do you think there is a framework missing for I don't want to say patients, but do you think there's a framework missing for people trying to have these conversations and with their doctors?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a good answer to that. I mean, I think, with the psychologist, she has a different background and training to try to draw out discussion around, again, are there causes of executive dysfunction, or is the deeper issue causes or just the reality of me having unfair expectations? Like, there's no clinical diagnosis around like, he has unreasonable expectations.
Yeah,
too hard on it's just part of the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that's just really challenging around a lot of this is there's no apparent, like, direct, clear, measurable path to a diagnosis.
No.
The way there would be for, let's say, type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Or other things, right? Where you have measures and causes are known, or at least, it seems like things involving, questions of mental health, it's a different challenge. So if we want to connect it to problem solving or process improvement, I don't know exactly what measures I would be going for. As like, I'm trying, I have some family history, and we're oversharing. I'm oversharing already. Not we, I am. There are measures. I'm trying to head off type 2 diabetes.
Oh,
and so a measure of blood sugar level is an important piece of data to understand cause and effect relationships between food choice, exercise, all these other things of, like, effects on blood sugar, and then therefore the effect that would have on health over time. There's a number there, and it seems like with a lot of mental health situations, it's not so cut and dry, right?
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, I guess I can rely on trained, experienced professionals to know how to navigate these things, because that's what their education is.
Yeah.
So it's not mine. I don't know. How do you see that?
In terms of, I totally forgot what the question was that I asked.
Well, just are we lacking frameworks to describe or understand
lacking frameworks,
things that, because say the struggle is real, quote unquote, but how to describe that struggle, and is there even quote unquote pathology behind it?
Without question, the struggle is real. Yes, we're missing a framework. I'm a very big believer in that. And that's one of the things, like, even with the ADHD Advocacy Society of BC that I'm a part of, and other things that I tend to do, is that conversation around medication, for example, that we were talking about earlier. One of the reasons that, there's a multitude of reasons why long-acting medications sort of pushed more than the short-acting ones, but one of the ones I found in a doctor's guide from BC Doctors in 2009 talked about that the doctors wanted to eliminate the second dose, and 30% of their patients essentially missed their second dose of their meds. So, hey, let's prescribe a long-acting med, and they won't have to worry about a second dose. But the problem with that is you lose that long-acting dose may not actually be right for you. The short-acting dose might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it interesting where I know with starting our Sana medication, this is now the end of week 2. I went to our pediatrician. I basically said, look, he's going to start short-acting because I'm on short-acting, and he's not going to go to long unless there's an actual good reason for it. But I want to stay nice and short and controlled and understand sort of where things are and how it affects them. And it's been a very positive experience so far. But
Yeah.
not everyone is going to have that type of conversation. And it's when you have that choice removed, at least as far as the medication conversation goes, you're running the risk into, you don't know why you're taking something the doctor's just told you to take it, and maybe you go down the road and you're in your 50s or 60s and you've ended up in a hospital and you're taking all these pills, but you don't necessarily know why.
Yeah.
So that's one side of it. The other side of it is there is no framework for talking about a diagnosis. And when we went into Owen's autism appointment at Sunny Hill in April, and I haven't shown you this yet, and I don't think you probably don't know. The spreadsheet that I put together basically took the entire diagnostic manual, and I essentially put all the information in from his life, and we had 300 rows of just different events that have gone on that are.
You did show me that. I didn't
I
really
did?
fully understand
Okay.
it, but you shared that with
Yes.
me.
Okay. But to sit there and when I broke down the charting piece of it, see, I don't remember showing you now, but showing that graphical piece of the information to say, oh, he's really rigid in there's the rigidity, there's the sameness, there's the social issues, and you can talk about it from this higher level, and you're not intimidated by a doctor and his medical knowledge to say, hey, I don't think it's this, it could be this. Yeah, but then as a parent, we've got all this lived experience, which is written down in these cells. Take it, capitalize on it. And that's where the framework's missing, because parents will put a little too much faith in the doctors and such, and bow down to their knowledge. But not all doctors are trained equal. The message the thing that you said about the GPs, that your family doctor did not diagnose you. I can't remember if it's a BC stat or a Canada stat. 52% of GPs up here are not comfortable diagnosing ADHD. So there's a massive lack of training and awareness, and there is absolutely a conversation that's missing, and that's why it's always interesting to see where people are at or what journey they've gone through with it. What tips do you have for, I guess, advocating better, or even asking better questions? Like practical advice. This is what I did. You should consider doing this.
I mean, I think, and this is something I think, I've heard others talk about, people I've interviewed on My Favorite Mistake, who are in the world of mental health or ADHD in different ways. I think it's one of those things where, again, hopefully if people have the ability to access resources, like if in doubt, go ask a medical professional or mental health professional, whether that's a physician or a counselor or your family doctor. Like if in doubt, bring it up and raise it as a point for discussion. I mean, I'm not saying I did the right or best thing of leading that conversation with I think I have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would have been open to them pushing back on that if they're diagnosed. If I had started off with that clinical psychologist a year and a half ago, I'm trying to think, well, how or what would have been, would have been working on whatever other underlying questions or concerns of, again, is it unfair expectations and being too hard on myself? Again, that something I could have started working on sooner, but I don't feel like it was a huge regret or wasted time, because I think some of the strategies that people might use to better organize themselves or structure things or can be beneficial to people who are not, or who are no longer diagnosed with ADHD. So I don't feel like that was a waste of time. I think the learning that I did to try to educate myself about all of this is still helpful knowledge to have. Helps me be more empathetic toward others in different ways, even if it's not just ADHD. That even if the journey hasn't been a straight line, some of the detours I think still add value.
Yeah.
No, and thankfully, and again, like I think this is where experts say, I've heard experts say that in terms of different mental health conditions, ADHD, not even just mental health, of any health condition, ADHD is the most treatable, and the medications are highly effective with very little risk of side effect.
Yeah.
So, and not everybody agrees with all of that. And again, I'm speaking as a layperson who was trying to be educated about all of this, because of course you want to talk about like, well, if I'm going to take this medication, I think there's going to be benefits. What are the downsides or the risk? I didn't have trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
I wasn't having manic episodes, or wasn't staying up all night working on a book the way some college student who has gotten medications on the black market might do. So it seemed like, well, I don't think it hurt to try.
No.
But I'm glad I reached out to try to get that second opinion, if you will. It was the third opinion, I guess. Sorry.
Third opinion.
Second year's opinion.
I've gone through more than my fair share of fourth and fifth and sixth opinions, and I just don't shut up about half of them.
But let me raise a point real quick. Before, and I'm going to have to wrap up soon, so I'm kind of hijacking maybe your attempt to wrap up. But I don't know, like when you think about manufacturing and quality gauges, there's this gauge R&R process of like you think in terms of weight. Like if you had the same person step on 10 different scales, how consistent is each of those 10 scales, and how accurate are those 10 scales, or 10 different people on 10 different scales? If you had 10 different people diagnosed, going through the diagnostic process through different providers, I don't know how, maybe I'm the outlier case of if I got misdiagnosed a year and a half ago, is that the outlier? Or I know a lot of people who go to doctors. I've heard stories of people who go to doctors and the doctors just refuse to diagnose them. Like friends I started talking to on Facebook when I'd shared some of this, a lot, very, very frequent, as I'm sure you've learned, Mark. People's children have ADHD. This tends to be hereditary. And then the parent realizes, oh, I've been living with undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah.
And some doctors refuse to accept that. And so there's this question of different medical opinions or biases, or how reliable is the diagnostic process?
That's one thing that we were talking about in our own group, as well as with part of the government here, is that if your child's got ADHD, that we're pushing for doctors should automatically start screening the parents too, especially if they don't know about it, and start asking those questions. For the long-acting meds, it's interesting for me because I did have the side effects, and I was not a fan of the insomnia or the nightmares / weird dreams, and that's partly why I actually switched over to short. Anyways, I want to wrap up with one last question.
Sure.
And one of our sponsors is a good friend of ours, Ms. Karen Ross of the Love and Kindness Project Foundation. And do you have a piece of advice or an idea that fits in with the motto of their foundation, which essentially is to think, act, or speak kindly? And it can be in regards, like it can be in the vein of this, in the spirit of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think so. The answer to that question, I think, relates to my podcast, My Favorite Mistake, which Karen was guest episode 3.
I need to get on there.
You can. You can. We'll do that. So Karen, and then through that podcast, helped me, in different ways. I have this coffee mug. I'll send you a coffee mug too, Mark. It's got some little mantras that was, a lot of it's from Karen's sort of coaching or inspiration, but it says here, be kind to yourself. Nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. Let's learn from our mistakes and help others do the same. So I try to apply that to when I've made a mistake, that same kind of thinking and reminders of, again, don't be too hard on yourself. Different way of saying be kind to yourself. And as Karen helped me understand, it doesn't mean to be nice to yourself. Like being kind to yourself is kind of a more action oriented, like I made this mistake. How can I learn and avoid repeating it? That's kind. Nice would be like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No one's perfect. That might be
put it under the carpet. It's all
poo-pooing it.
Yeah, no.
Right. And Karen's helped me understand that. And I think I know my book is better as a result of some of the coaching and guidance that Karen's given me. So, and I think a lot of this also applies if I'm having a day where I'm having trouble paying attention in a group meeting. I'm not saying to give up and stop caring about any of that, but can find the balance of being more kind to myself. And don't beat yourself up for your mistakes. Don't beat yourself up for whatever gap you think there is and attentiveness or what have you. You're doing the best. You're doing the best that you can, and sometimes that's all you can do. I mean, hang your hat on that.
Yeah, and I think I think it's an invitation as well to be curious. Because on the office side of things, you and I know we've both seen it. You have that person who may very well have, who might have that blow up in the office or send a snippy email or something like that. But if we're not thinking that, hey, that person's, they've got a disability, it's ADHD, or maybe they're undiagnosed autistic or something like that, and they just randomly blow up for whatever reason. And, there could be home stress or something like that. I think that's an invitation to be kind, to be curious as well, to say, oh,
Right.
We shouldn't make fun of Bob. Bob, something's not quite right. And Bob seems nice. What can we, maybe there's a way that we can empower him to open up and just say, hey, what's going on? As opposed to, I think, the typical office way, which is just sort of dumping on someone and then the gossip starts and everything else starts. And that's certainly how I look at things very differently now.
And even though this doesn't seem to be 100% fully understood, I'm glad that I have this recognition now of the idea that somebody with ADHD, it's not a weakness in them, it's a difference in their brain.
Yeah.
And I think just recognizing that helps you from blaming or labeling somebody unfairly.
Yeah, agree. Any closing thoughts?
No, I'm glad. I mean, I think the last couple of things you brought up were a good thing to end on. I appreciate you letting me come on here and talk about this journey. Like when I shared with some people personally, and even in a workplace context a year and a half ago, that I thought that I had been diagnosed with ADHD. I wasn't looking for sympathy, or I was just trying to share that partly in the sense of, I was 48 years old and there are things I wish I had known. Yep. And maybe somebody else can benefit from that sharing. And then other people will raise their hand and say, well, yeah, me too. And then you have a network of friends and people that you can talk to about struggle or strategies or what have you. And I know I told some stories that might not have been as relevant, but hopefully our conversation here today helps somebody somewhere.
Thank you for listening to our show.
If you're hearing this message, you've reached the end of the episode, and for that, I want to say thank you. I hope you have enjoyed what you've heard and are walking away with newfound knowledge.
We are the ADHD Family.
See you soon for a new episode. I have 3 things to ask of you. Number 1, if you have any comments, questions, or guest ideas, please leave a comment on the Facebook page. Number 2, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps people find us. And number 3, if you want to be a guest on the show or know someone who would make a great guest, contact me through our Facebook page. This podcast is open to everyone. You don't need to be an expert, just passionate and want to see change. The opinions expressed by the host and guest are not associated with any employer or organization unless otherwise stated.